Yo, yo, what is up, guys? It's Cone back here again today with another recap of the NBA games from earlier. This is a really, really good slate of games, or it was supposed to be, and then almost all of them turned into blowouts because that's the way the NBA works, it seems. But there were still some good games, namely, I want to talk about Suns Lakers, which ended up being a 10-point win for the Suns, but it was a great game. A lot of narratives I want to talk about. And I just mostly want to talk about how good the Phoenix Suns are. They're a team that I really, really like watching play. They're one of my favorite teams in the entire NBA right now because they have some of my favorite players in the league, namely Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Chris Paul, former Thunder legend. Devin Booker, just huge fan of him as a player. Drop a like, drop a subscribe if you like content like this, and I'll just go ahead and get into it. Like I said, Suns Lakers. Suns ended up beating the Lakers by 10 points and are now at the 2 seed in the Western Conference. If you had asked anyone at this point in the season who they thought the top 2 seeds in the West would be, I don't think there's a single soul on the entire planet that would have told you Jazz and Suns. I don't think anyone would have told you that. And that's what's cool about the NBA, especially this season. It feels like there's a lot of unpredictability. While you obviously have the powerhouse teams like the Sun, or not the Suns, like the Lakers, the Clippers, you have the Nets, you have the Sixers, the Bucks. Like there are these big name teams, but you have guys who people kind of slept on, like the Suns, the Jazz. And I mean, I'm not exempt from this either. I didn't think the Suns would be this good, like this fast either. I projected them more as like a bottom half of the conference type team. I thought they would be a playoff contender for sure, but I thought that there would be some growing pains. And while there kind of were, they started out the season going 8-8. Now they've got 15-3 in their games since that 8-8 start, and they're just mowing people down. They very rarely lose badly. Probably the worst loss they've had recently was the loss to the Nets, where James Harden just kind of went ballistic without KD and Kyrie. That was a bad loss, but clearly it sparked a fire in these Suns because they're on fire. They beating the Lakers even without AD is no small feat, and especially since the Suns had to do it without Devin Booker for a lot of the game. Devin Booker, if you don't know, got ejected in the third quarter for some stupid reason. I need to make a video talking about the referees. Referees have been awful this season. There are so many problems and so many things I could complain about with them, but I'm not going to get into it too much in this video because, like I said, I kind of want to make that its own video. And right now, instead, I just want to mostly praise the Suns. Chris Paul, my guy, one of my favorite players of all time. He just came in and changed this team, and the Suns themselves do deserve a lot of credit. Monty Williams has been a fantastic coach this season. I think he should definitely be in the Coach of the Year running. And the Suns did build kind of a culture going 8-0 in the bubble last season. They started to establish that winning culture, but this Suns team hasn't made the playoffs in a decade without the playoffs. And now this season, Chris Paul comes in, and they're a top 2 seed in the very, very tough Western Conference. You've got so many good teams out there, and the Suns are just making wins happen. They brought in a lot of pieces that are new to this team. You've got Jay Crowder, who just came in. You've got Etuan Moore. You've got guys who are trying to fit more into their roles, like a Dario Saric, a Cam Johnson. DeAndre Ayton, he even has to adjust a little bit. You've got guys who are making a lot of adjustments. Michael Bridges is trying to adjust into more of a focal point of the Suns' offense. Huge shout out to Michael Bridges, by the way. He is really, really good, and he's really impactful. Like 3 times today during the Suns-Lakers game, the ball was going out of bounds. I was like, oh, that's a turnover, or oh, that's just going to go out. And Bridges just flies in, makes an incredible save. He just made so many hustle plays. And I feel like that was a huge tone setter for this game. This was a really chippy game. And in those really chippy games, you need guys who make the hustle plays. You need guys who are going to go all out for those small moments in the overall scheme of the game. Those loose balls, saving balls from going out of bounds, that get you those buckets to keep building the lead. And tonight, that was Bridges. He had a couple clutch threes as well. I really like his development as a player. I think he's going to be really, really good. He's a player that any team would like to have, especially at a very young age. And I think he's going to be a staple to the Suns team for the long term. Now, going back to Chris Paul, he's been a huge mentor, especially for Devin Booker. Devin Booker is playing some of his best basketball in his entire career. Him and Chris Paul work together super well. I think a lot of teams are going to regret not trading for Chris Paul. I think namely teams like the Sixers and the Bucks could definitely have used Chris Paul. Now, they're playing incredibly on their own, so I'm not saying it's a mistake quite yet, but the way that Chris Paul impacts the Suns team, the way that he just makes everyone around him better, is something that's very hard to find in other guys. And if you didn't believe that Chris Paul was super impactful last season with OKC or any time before his career, all you have to do is take a look at this Suns team to see they play like a team that has made the playoffs for the past 5 years. Like they play like a core of veterans who have been to the playoffs, they know how to compete, and they have it. Very few guys on this roster have a ton of playoff experience. You've got like a Jay Crowder who has a bunch of experience, obviously Chris Paul, but outside of that, you have a lot of young guys, Bridges, Booker, Ayton. These are huge pieces to your team that haven't been to the playoffs before, and they're playing like they've been there. They're playing like they know exactly how to get there, and I'm very interested to see how this team performs in the playoffs, which brings about the question, can the Suns win the West? which is a crazy question that I didn't even know if I was going to be asking as a huge fan of this Suns team, or a huge fan of their roster at least, going into the season. I had no idea what they were going to perform like. Like I said, I thought there would be growing pains, but that just hasn't been the case. Everyone has adjusted to their roles really well. Everyone plays for each other. They play for the team, and it's resulting in a lot of wins. Now, can they win the West? I'm not too sure about that. I think they are very young, and I think that this year making the playoffs and making a playoff run might be more of a experience gaining type thing. I see them more as like a second round exit probably at this point. I would not be shocked if they made a run to the Western Conference Finals, but making it through whatever really tough team, whether it's a Lakers, a Clippers, a Jazz, they play in that second round is going to be really tough. And then making it out of the Western Conference Finals after playing one of those teams just as difficult, especially for a very young team. With Chris Paul as your leader, though, anything is possible. I would love to see this Suns team make it out of the West, or especially win the finals. If I'm not expecting the Thunder make the playoffs, so if the Suns make the playoffs, that's probably the team I'll be pushing for in the West. Just because, like I said, love the roster, I love the way they play, and I love the story of this underdog team that has been trying to rebuild for years and years and years. And that's a cool storyline. The fact that they are going from a rebuild. Last season they were bad. I feel like this season I feel like they're already approaching their win total from last season at this point, not even halfway through a shortened season. Like, they've been so bad for so long. And now they decided, all right, we're done. We are going all in. We are ending this rebuild right now. Trade for Chris Paul, pay Jay Crowder, pay each one more, bring in these pieces, and they're good. They're not even good, they're great. And if you're not watching Suns games, I highly recommend it. They're super fun to watch. I'm going to keep watching this Suns team, and I hope they are able to make some kind of run out west. That would be amazing for basketball, and it would be amazing as a fan of the game, a fan of the underdog, and I think it's just good for basketball that the Suns are good again. So shout out to the Phoenix Suns. They deserve this after years of suffering, waiting to make the playoffs again, waiting to finally have this great team. They finally got it. So Suns fans, you deserve it. Outside of that game, like I said, there wasn't a ton of interesting games in terms of like closeness. Like, there were some interesting storylines. Probably the best game outside of that was the Clippers Celtics game. In fact, that definitely was the best game out of the rest of the slate. This game was close all the way through. It was a really fun one. Kawhi Leonard was a late scratch, which kind of sucked, but in the end, Celtics came out on top by 5 points. Paul George didn't have a great clutch performance, but he was great all game. This loss isn't on him. Really, it was just on the fact that they were missing Kawhi Leonard. They couldn't get enough production from outside guys. Reggie Jackson deserves a lot of credit. He was phenomenal this game. The Celtics side of the ball, Kemba Walker really stepped up. He stepped up the past couple nights. And if Kemba Walker can play like this Celtics team is like half of their problems disappear. Because their biggest problems are they need someone who can create a shot for themselves or can create shots for others. Kemba Walker is capable of both, but if his shot's not falling, that's half of his game gone because he's not giving you a ton on the defensive end. So you need him to make shots, you need him to create for others. And while he's still usually able to create for others, if that shot's not falling, that's half of the impact. If he's able to be that shot creator that they need, then that takes a lot of pressure off Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They're two all-stars who are also both competing in the three-point contest. That'll be interesting to see. If you take that pressure out of them, it just lets them open their game a ton more. So if Kemba Walker is playing well, this Celtics team, it raises their floor and their ceiling by so much. And I know that's a very surface level statement to make, but I feel like people just think that Kemba Walker is like really, really bad now. And I don't think he's really bad now. He's definitely not quite the player he was a couple years ago in Charlotte, but he's been dealing with a ton of injuries. There's constant role changes. It's a lot of new pieces are being brought in, and this team's trying to figure out their identity right now. And I think once Marcus Smart comes back and he also helps them out, I think that this Celtics team's going to be fine. They'll be good. They'll be in the playoffs, and they'll be a team that teams don't really want to face. The Clippers side of the ball, like I said, Kawhi Leonard being out, I don't think this says too much about the Clippers. This now, I think, makes them the 4th seed in the West, which it's not that big of a deal. They're very, very close to being able to make it back up to that 2, that 3 seed. I think they're only like 1 game back or like half a game back or something like that. So it's no big deal. I don't think the Clippers should take this loss too harshly. Knicks Spurs, this game was a blowout. There's not much more I can say about it. It was a 26-point win for the Spurs. This was an all-around group effort. A lot of guys scoring double digits. I want to give a quick shout-out to Dejante Murray, who, in my opinion, has been one of the most underrated young players in the entire league for not just this season, but for the long term. People don't really talk about him. He plays phenomenal defense. He's been averaging crazy numbers recently. Just if you're not paying attention to Dejante Murray, pay attention to him because he's really, really good. And DeMar DeRozan as well. He's not getting a lot of love. Especially not from the All-Star committee. He's a guy who definitely could have been an All-Star, didn't quite make it, and despite that, the Spurs have been really good despite not having any All-Stars. The Spurs just seem to never die. Even last season when they missed the playoffs, they just barely missed it. And this season, it's looking like they're trying to make that push to stay again. We'll see if it ends up sticking because there are a lot of good teams in the West. You've got the Nuggets on the rise. You've got the Warriors on the rise. You've got the Mavericks who are finally hitting their stride. So it'll be interesting to see if the Spurs end up as the odd man out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not. Nuggets Bucks, another blowout. This was another huge loss, 31-point loss for the Bucks. Big win for the Nuggets. Jokic, by the way, is less than 2% away on his free throw percentage from averaging a 50-40-90 near triple-double. He's unreal. And his MVP case continues to grow. He's got the counting stats. It's just the team success that he needs. If this Nuggets team finds a way to be a 1 or 2 seed in the West, I find it very hard to give the award to someone other than Jokic. We'll see, man. It's going to be interesting. I think it might end up coming down to him and Embiid, depending on if the Sixers can hold that spot and if the Nuggets can kind of make that run with the team success that he's going to need. But, man, that's going to be really interesting to watch. The Bucks side of the ball, they just got killed tonight. It just wasn't their night. They let Jokic walk all over them. Giannis had a pretty solid game. They just couldn't stop him. Hawks Heat, this game was kind of gross, 94-80. Trae Young had some cool threes. The Heat just missing Jimmy Butler really badly. There's not much you can say about this game. I don't think that the Hawks beating the Heat by 14 and only allowing 80 points immediately speaks to that Lloyd Pierce was the problem or anything like that, because like I said, it's the first game since it happened, the firing of Lloyd Pierce, that is. I don't think Nate McMillan is some like saver that has now made the Hawks a contender. While it's very possible he's going to improve that team, I think we need to wait a little bit before making any like large assumptions about that firing, that hiring, all that stuff. Grizzlies Wizards, the final game of the slate. This was another game that had a lot of potential to be really interesting, and then John Morant said, "No, it's not going to be interesting. I'm just going to murder you guys." Probably his best game of the entire season. I can't think of any other games that were better than this. 35 points, 10 assists, 5 rebounds, which is just a very like eye-appealing stat line. Dylan Brooks had 20 points. I'm not surprised. He shoots the ball a lot. Valanciunas 11 and 16. They just killed the Wizards. All over the boards. There's no paint protector on this Wizards team right now. Mo Wagner is not going to protect the paint very well. Russ and Beal both had solid games. Both had 23, which is kind of a down game for Bradley Beal, but still a decent game for most players. Russ also had 15 assists. They just weren't destined. They tried to make a late game comeback, and it just wasn't enough. De'Anthony Melton, shout out to him. He was incredible tonight. A guy that a lot of people don't talk about in the Grizzlies, but he's a really impactful player when he's on the court. So that was all the games from today. Like I said, let me know what you think about the Suns, man, because they're, in my opinion, probably like a top 3 most fun to watch team in the entire NBA right now. I love watching the Suns play. If you're not watching the Suns play, watch them more. Also, their Valley jerseys are beautiful. Those are super nice jerseys. I'm a big fan of those. Yeah. So with that being said, let me know what you think about the Suns. Let me know what you think about all the games from today. What were your takeaways? Let me know what you think about the referees, Devin Booker's ejection. If you haven't seen it, go look it up on Twitter or YouTube, wherever the hell you want to find it. I'm sure it's a million places. I know House of Highlights posts on Instagram, so if you want to go find it, you can also look there. Yeah, and be on the lookout. Let me know if you want that referee video. If you made it this far, say SGA should have been an all-star, and I will see you guys later. Real one, say it back.